I'd like to cover a very timely topic today that shortly, and it's started already, but we will be bombarded from every side by it and all of its nuances. Permit me to share an interesting phenomenon I noticed in Colombia during the Feast of Tabernacles around that time. It was when I walked into the mall every morning before it opened. I would walk and make my rounds for about 45 minutes to an hour. And even though the language written and spoken there is Spanish, and it's a different culture, on many of the stores, it reflects the United States or the English-speaking culture. What was plastered on one of the storefronts on the glass with all of its decoration was Happy Halloween in English. And it was a large mattress store. It took over the regular signage. I don't know why you would want to buy a mattress with spiders and things on it, but we've seen when traveling in Guatemala as well, Black Friday. Big stores they like noise, so they have speakers and radios and just stacked all over out in the street with guards and noise blaring. You can hear it for blocks away. Black Friday in English. A big shopping day after Thanksgiving. Now, El Dia de Gracias, some have something to do with it, but it's not a national holiday there that I'm aware of, which here, now less than a week away. But what I've noticed already 3 weeks ago here was the start of reminding us only 7 weeks until Christmas. Now it's only, 5 weeks? I don't keep exact count, but I think eventually, this is my opinion, but eventually we will have a nation that will bypass. They'll go straight from Halloween to Christmas. Thanksgiving will be irrelevant. That's just I'm not a prophet. We're a nonprofit organization, but we'll see maybe eventually if that happens. Maybe not in our lifetime. In just a few short days, every time you turn on the radio or go into a shopping mall or gas stations, they play music now. You notice that? You start pumping gas and the music blares. It's so annoying for me. But you'll start hearing Christmas music. I've learned not to simply assume anything within the church, and some of our newer members may not have thoroughly researched this holiday. One of the reasons I want to talk about this. I want to make it very clear right up front. This festival that we're going to talk about has no biblical roots or origin, and we in the United Church of God do not celebrate or observe it. So that pretty much I can end the sermon. We did it, right? Are we all clear on that? It seems every year, though, they start the Christmas music earlier. Last year, way before Thanksgiving, I heard music and saw decorations. In the neighborhood that we lived in, we'll see how it is this year, but in the neighborhood we lived in previously, the yard ornaments and decorations went straight from Halloween to Christmas, just seamlessly. And I am amazed at the thousands of dollars that people spend in time. These elaborate, for both Halloween and Christmas. And I guess we'll find out what they do where we live, although the POA sent out a note that you can only do certain holidays, and it only has how many days after the holiday it's got to be cleaned up. Yay. Back where I lived before, they were there for months. You know, you had the ice light sickles, whatever those are called, hanging, and snowmen and things that had been deflated and laying sideways on the grass for months. So, anyway, interesting as the world becomes involved in this direction. Think of some of the songs that you hear. I always like to do this. Some focus on biblical themes, someone told me, and yes, they do. Others on themes that are not mentioned or associated with the Bible at all. What is interesting, let me share this, I have never observed Christmas that I remember. So that tells you how long I haven't. But I know most all of the songs. I don't know, I can't speak for Mr. Mez here or some of you others, but that have been around a long time, maybe you can. I could sing them to you word for word. What's up with that? Why is that? I've never celebrated. I don't partake of it, but let me help you with a few. It's beginning to look a lot more like Christmas everywhere you go. There's no more. A lot like Christmas everywhere you go. If you can listen to these without hearing the melody and singing it in your mind, you're better than I am. Which reminds me, there's no place like home for the holidays. The other night I dreamed of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know. I also saw Mama kissing Santa Claus. He had a little drummer boy with him and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Oh, and by the way, this was the night before Christmas when Santa Claus is coming to town. Then there are songs that are supposed to have a religious theme at the core. Silent Night. It came upon a midnight clear away in a manger. O little town in Bethlehem, O come all you faithful. Joy to the world, not the one by Three Dog Night. You all know that one? Probably not. Jeremiah was a bullfrog, was a good friend of mine. I woke Paul up, okay. The First Noel. Some of these songs have enchanting melodies that stick in your head, don't they? They're very pretty. You and I are greeted before long by Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Or you'll be asked, I love this one, no I don't, do you have all your Christmas shopping done and will you have all your children home for Christmas? Or do you have your tree decorated this year? I always like that one. I'm finding, I had a neighbor last year that his wife was really into Christmas. He's a great fellow, and she had to have a real one. So he had to go get a big Christmas tree and put it up, and he was just going on, lamenting how much work it was and a pain, and he ate up 2 days. And he said, you don't have one, do you? I said, no, we don't. And he said, lucky you. I said, well, you don't have to have one either. Oh, my wife would leave me. So I don't think my wife would leave me maybe if I put one up. She said, if you put one up, yeah. I don't know. But do you have your tree decorated this year? I want to define the word Christian, first of all. Christian, not Christmas, but Christian. It's an adjective, or relating to or professing Christianity or its teachings, i.e. the Christian church. It's a noun as well, a person who has received Christian baptism or is a believer in Jesus Christ and his teachings. What the definition leaves out is a person who is a Christian also not only believes, but does and obeys those things God has made clear in his word that we are to do. Not what we think it says, or our personal revelation of our wisdom, but what God says. That's very important. So as a Christian, how do we handle Christmas? What do we do? You've heard lots of sermons about this. I know that. But it's good to be reminded, and some may say, well, I've never had to face this. We need to fully understand why we do not observe Christmas and be able to clearly explain it to our children and grandchildren. We have a responsibility to teach our children the truth. It's not just, as one person told me one time, harmless fun to teach lies to our children. They'll figure it out when they get older. I've had in my office, in a private counseling practice, people that were traumatized emotionally when they, and you may laugh, but they realized that there was no Easter Bunny, no Santa Claus, that some of these things were not real. And it upset them because then they had doubt. What else did their parents lie to them about? So every year there are articles in newspapers discussing the origin of Christmas. Most people know the day was of non-Christian origin, or pagan, that word, which simply means non-Christian. But they reason they don't celebrate it or do it for that reason. It's all about family, or all of the other things, and giving and sharing. And they mask it in various ways. One of the still most often read publications, they have it in big print, which is nice, the Reader's Digest, has published an extensive article on this topic. And the title is Christmas Celebrations Before Christ. In 1994, I know this is going back a ways, but Reader's Digest published a book titled, Why in the World? Beginning on page 190, the question is asked, why do we celebrate Christmas? You may be asked this question by your neighbors, by your employer, by your family members that don't understand what we do. The author continues, if the question offends or the answer seems obvious, read on. A feast with the semblance of Christmas, Sakea, was celebrated thousands of years before Christ was born. In 2000 BC, in what is now Iraq, a 5-day festival with exchange of gifts, performance of plays, accompanied by processions and merrymaking, marked what? The death of winter and heralded the new year. Now, we don't suffer the major consequences, as far as I understand here, living in Florida before and now in Alabama and the Gulf Coast. We don't suffer the same amount of cold that I did growing up in Nebraska, or when I used to help and serve in Winterpeg, as we called it, Manitoba, or Wisconsin that we lived for 14 years. So don't have the same effect here. The days are shorter, but when I can still get up and there's no ice formed anywhere, it's good. And we are thankful for that. And many of us are here for that reason. So the death of winter, when the sun reached the earth reached that level in the sun and the inclination and all those things that the days start getting longer and it's warmer, and it also heralded the new year. It's likely those beliefs from the East spread into Central Europe. In the depths of winter, for example, people lit bonfires or bonfires in the hope of reviving the dying sun and bringing warmth to the ground. I get that. I can understand why you would want to do something to warm things up. If you've never experienced having the ice things stuck to your mud flaps, and Paul probably has, and others I know you have, if you've never experienced that, where the only way they come off is at a gas station, you kick them off and then you roll them to the side so somebody else can run over them. But they're there. Or shoveling snow until you can't throw it anymore. I've had that. The snowblower won't go any higher and you can't throw it anymore, and then it starts falling back down. If you haven't experienced that, yes, you'd love to warm things up. They decorated their homes with evergreens, holly and firs, to show dormant seeds and lifeless plants that all was not dead. When the sun eventually shone again, they rejoiced in their success and no doubt vowed to repeat the magic forever after. Further north, along the Baltic and in Scandinavia, a winter festival known as Yule honored the gods Odin and Thor. Great logs blazed, minstrels sang, famous legends were recounted, and villagers drank lustily from the horns of mead. In this context, I have in my office, those of you that have been there or will be there, the Encyclopedia Britannica, the 1910-11 edition, volume 6, points out on page 294 that in Britain, the 25th of December was a festival long before the conversion to Christianity. The ancient peoples of the Angli began the year on the 25th of December. So we continue, Reader's Digest, Why in the World, on page 190. In the Roman Empire, a week-long orgy of feasting and wild revelry, the Saturnalia, was held in mid-December when the sun was approaching its lowest. This is why they've proven around, Christmas time or this time of year, about 9 months from this time of year, there's a lot of babies born. It's cold and it's dark, so people go to bed. And when you're in bed, anyway, enough said. The winter solstice, the turning point of the year when the length of the day began to increase, was marked by a sacred day called Dies Natalis Invicti Solis, or the birthday of the unconquered sun. During the Saturnalia, the Romans decked their houses with laurels and greenery. Hence you get decked the halls with boughs of holly. Right? Friends exchanged presents. It was a season of general rejoicing with goodwill to all men. Peace on earth and goodwill to all men. The Persians burned fires at the winter solstice. Their feast revered Mithras, the god of light and guardian against evil. Soldiers and traders spread the worship of Mithras to Europe, where for a time the belief rivaled Christianity. Yet many, here's the interesting thing, after they learn the truth, they hear me say this, they read it, they research it, and they find out it's true, about the origins of the world's holidays, ask, what difference does it make? In sermons and in conversation, I talk about the fact that you and I must be holy as God is holy, and that we are to be different with God's Spirit living in us. In Jeremiah chapter 10, I've heard a lot of sermonettes about this, but in Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 1 to 2, it says, "Do not learn the way of the nations. For the customs," verse 3, "of the people are worthless," the NIV says. The New Revised Standard Version says, "The customs of the people are false." The New American Standard says, "The customs of the people are delusion." If I were to say to you, "You are delusionary," would that be a compliment? Probably not. If I were to say, "You are false," you might or might not like that. If I were to say, "You are worthless," you wouldn't like that. Do not learn the way of the Gentile, the ways, how they do things, how they worship God, the way, the road, the distance, the journey, the manner, the path, the direction, the course of life, the moral character. Indeed, Christianity is a way of life. Let's go to Acts chapter 18. Acts chapter 18. I think Darius McNeely gave a sermon, probably in the Carolinas back when he came to visit one time when we were gone. Acts chapter 18, verse 25. Well, let's go back to verse 24. A certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, a prominent area of the city, an eloquent man and mighty in the Scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man was instructed in the way of the Lord. And being fervent in the Spirit, he spoke and taught diligently the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, whom when Aquila and Priscilla, they're mentioned, I think, 6 times in the New Testament, had heard, they took unto him and expounded unto him the way of God more perfectly. In Acts chapter 19 and verse 9, just over a few verses, but when different were hardened and believed not, but spoke evil of that way before the multitude, he departed from them and separated the disciples, disputing daily in the school and one of Tyrannus. Some of us don't like to dispute anything. It was the way that the discussion, this is why I'm having in New Orleans and Laurel monthly Bible studies that are interactive. I've noticed they're not used to that so much, although they kind of opened up as we go. And by the time I'm done with the series, sometimes it becomes rather animated. Well, why do you say that? That's a good question. And then it's not, in the Jewish culture at the time of Christ, it is very common. If you've ever watched on television, on C-SPAN it used to be called, I don't know what it's called now, but you see the British Parliament talking, very animated, like they're going to kill each other. Then they go out and have a pint, everything's fine. In the church, we like to debate things and do it in a respectful manner. People are like, ministers are the worst at this. They just get louder and more forceful. And they should be able to listen and discuss it and say, well, why do you do that? Why do you make that decision? Explain that. And to be able to discuss it. And so here, others that were hardened, they didn't believe that way, departed from separated the disciples, disputing daily. So, there was also those that did this that didn't agree. And they were causing challenges and problems. But there was this way that God says that this man here believed. Okay, was instructed, was fervent, speaking the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. And he expounded to him this way of life. Acts chapter 9, verse 2, going back a few verses. Acts chapter 9 and verse 2. and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of the way, as it should be in the original text, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound in Jerusalem. So they looked for those that spoke the way properly, a traveled road, a journey, a metaph, a course of conduct, a way of thinking, feeling, and deciding. There is a way of how we worship God that is specified in the Scriptures. Now, some like to take exceptions to that. Well, I think it should be done like this. And I've read this Scripture, and I think this. And God says, no, this is the way you do it. There is a way of man that seems right to a man. What's it say? The way thereof is the end. It's death, spiritually. Whose way are we to follow? John chapter 14 and verse 6. John chapter 14 and verse 6. John 14 and verse 6 says, Jesus said unto him, I am the eternal one that's always been and always will be. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father but by me. The other side of this is John 6:44. No man can come to him except the Father draws him. So the two work together. But it says Jesus Christ is the way. Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15, let's go there, please. Verse 9. You can worship God in vain, meaning useless, it doesn't matter, God does not accept it, by creating your own man-made religion. God tells us how to worship Him. In verse 9, in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. In the Bible studies in New Orleans and Laurel, I'm going through the fundamental beliefs, the doctrines of the church. Not the doctrines of men. Not the doctrines of what we think it is. What does it mean to be vain, to be without any result, to no avail with no result? A number of languages or expressions such as without results may be rendered as will accomplish nothing, or will be though it had never happened. So when people say, well, what does it matter? This is just about family and fun and giving and celebrating, and it does matter. In Leviticus chapter 18, let's go back there. We look at a lot of scriptures today, but Leviticus chapter 18, verse 1. The Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel. Here we're going through in Leviticus 18 through chapter 20 the ethical and moral laws. It prepared these people of God to be significantly different. An admonition to our modern society of Israel today. Speak of the children of Israel and say, I am the Lord your God. After doing the things of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, you shall not do. And after the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall you not do. Neither shall you walk in their ordinances. You shall do my judgments. Keep mine ordinances to walk therein. I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes, my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. Pretty bold. If I were to read this in a good Sunday-keeping church somewhere, I don't think they would like it very well. The message of the Old Testament and the New Testament is consistent. Worship God in the manner that He tells us, not by the quaint customs of the nation. I don't care how nice they look, how wonderful they feel, right? I mean, if you drink enough eggnog that's got alcohol in it, you feel pretty good. You don't have quite the hangover because of the things that are in it. I love eggnog without the alcohol. I used to look forward to this time of year. Remember, it had cinnamon, and Wisconsin being the dairy state. Oh, I just thought of a bad joke, and we won't go there. But anyway, No, I definitely won't. Got to erase that from my recording. But being the dairy state, they had some really good cream, and some of the egg yolks, it was really good. I can't have that now, but back then I could, and that's probably why I can't have it now. But, you know, there are things that are enjoyable. Having a fire, having a big dinner, giving gifts, you know, nothing wrong with giving gifts. It's what is the purpose of it? It makes a big difference. What difference does it make? It makes a big difference to God. It also affects our salvation if we worship God in vain. Another argument. So what if they aren't really Christian? We observe them in honor of Christ. You're going to see this. You'll see it on billboards and advertisements and bumper stickers. Put Christ back in Christmas. Christ was never in Christmas. That's what the Bible clearly points out. So you could say that's a ridiculous statement. Well, good way to get your nose bloodied, but, you know, we've made them Christian, if you will, by the way we observe them, they say. You and I need to ask ourselves, how does one honor Christ? How do we honor him? Matthew chapter 7. Let's go back there. Matthew 7. I need to make myself a note here. I've learned to write it down, otherwise it's fleeting and gone forever. Anybody ever do that? Am I the only one? The other night we were listening to some music, and it was maybe Nora Jones or someone like that, and this name came up I didn't recognize. The music was beautiful. I said, yeah, I got to write that down. And my wife gave me a pen and paper. I wrote it down, and the next day I looked at it. What's that? Oh, yeah. Would have been gone. So, but anyway, Matthew 7. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 21. Not everyone. So how do we honor Christ? Not everyone that says, Lord, Lord, Jesus. I've mentioned that. Anytime there's more than two syllables, you know it's more religious. They say, Jesus. You got to have that extra emphasis there, syllable. Not everyone that says, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heavens, but he that does the will of my Father which is in heaven. Okay, that's pretty blatant. Many will say to me, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied? Have we not preached in your name? In the name we cast out demons, and in your name done many wonderful works. And then I will profess unto them, I don't have a clue who you are. Depart from me, you that work lawlessness. Wow. Therefore, whosoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. The rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew, and beat upon the house, and it didn't fall, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that hears the sayings of mine and does them not shall be likened unto a fool, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon it, and great was the fall of it. So you honor Christ by what? By obeying him. Deuteronomy chapter 12. Let's go back there. Hopefully I won't give you too much Bible burn to it today. You know what that is, where the scriptures are going back and forth so fast your fingers catch on fire? All right. Deuteronomy 12 and verse 29. When the Lord your God shall cut off the nations from before you where you go to possess them, and you succeed them and dwell in their land, take heed that to yourself that you do not become snared by following them. After that they be destroyed before you. Inquire not after their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their gods? Even so we will do likewise. You shall not do so unto the Lord your God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hates have you done unto their gods, for even their sons and daughters they sacrificed and burnt them in the fire to their gods. Whatever I command you, observe to do it. You shall not add to it nor diminish from it. So can we just add Christmas or take it away? It's not in here, so we better not add it. But yet some say, what's the problem? God has the authority to tell us how to worship Him. Again, we see the Old Testament and the New Testament are consistent. Okay, consistent. That's a New Testament. That's better than the New Testament, consistent. Right now, though, this question comes up, and I've fielded some of these. Okay, what is there that is Christian about Christmas then? Well, are any of these proof texts? I've been told December 25th was Christ's birthday. December 25th has a lot of dates of things. I'll be at winter camp, I think, during that time. Not yet? We'll be traveling. Okay. We'll be driving on ice-laden, snowy roads. The birth of the sun god, the winter solstice, gift-giving and commercialism, the Yule log, decorations and the Christmas tree, and Santa Claus. Any of those? What scriptures? I'll open it up here. Hopefully nobody will raise their hand. What scriptures can you turn to support observing or doing any of these activities? You might be surprised by those often used to explain why it is okay to celebrate Christmas. There are several reasons why we should not observe Christmas or teach the observance of it. And I can say this, and this is a pretty bold statement, if the United Church of God tells me I have to start teaching we can observe Christmas, I will be unemployed, unless I lose my mind, which could happen. I would hope, as long as I remain close to God, I would do that. That's better. I don't want to make some brash statement. But I would hope and pray and do my best. But I'm not going to be unwise enough to say I would never do that. It's like saying I would never leave the church. God willing, with His Spirit and yielding to that, I wouldn't. But I don't want to be brash enough to say as a human being that I can't err or sin. So, let's be undisguised. That's the title of the sermon today. Christmas Undisguised. Honest, frank, direct, open, straight, blunt. We have a responsibility as a church, and I do as a pastor, to teach the truth, not what folks want to hear or be taught. Now, I try to weave some of that in that is encouraging, that the Scripture gives us. Christmas teaches lies. There is a Santa Claus. No, there isn't. Not one that God said that we should follow. Santa comes around on a sled with reindeer. Children are watched all year long to see if they're naughty or nice. Well, sort of, but not for gifts. Parents are always watching to see if they're naughty or nice. We do that with a lot of things, and we should, to a point. Christ was born on December 25th. That's a flat-out lie. John 8:44, let's look at that scripture. John 8:44, what's that say? John 8:44. Somebody's getting some new teeth, right? Maybe? I don't know, it's been a long time, but a parent just can tell by the unsettledness that maybe someone's getting new teeth. It's about the same way you are when you're like 85 or 90 and you get new teeth, the same sound. John 8:44, I hope I didn't offend anybody on that. John 8:44, you are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth because there is no truth in him. Did we get that? There is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Satan's a liar, so why are we not surprised that a world blinded by the God of this world would buy into the lie? Any of you like when you're lied to? I've been lied to. I've lied to people. Hopefully I'd not intentionally, but you feel duped. Maybe you bought a car that some little old lady from Pasadena didn't drive to get groceries once a day for 20 years. Maybe you bought a house. We just purchased a new house. There's a few things we found that were covered up. You know? Nothing super major, sort of, but things that, that's interesting. Oh, you start looking closer, that's been patched before. There was a problem there, right? They don't disclose those things, You buy it, you don't know. People aren't going to say, the roof caved in and we replaced all this and we had a mold and mildew. I'm not saying my house had this, but a mold and mildew problem, or we had a house fire in 1948 and the whole thing's been redone and, or the foundation or termites or whatever. John 14:6 says Jesus Christ is not only the way, but He's the truth. Sometimes we don't like to be told certain things, but we like to be told the truth. Maybe someone says, look, here's what's happening with this project. I owned companies, my wife and I did years ago, and sometimes the foreman would say, I need to talk to you. We got a problem on this challenge here. Here's what's going on. And you knew he was telling the truth, and maybe you didn't want to hear it. But and he said, if you don't do this and this is going to happen. Here's what's going on. You don't want to just be told everything's fine. Over the years, I've looked at a lot of church reports. Sometimes you see church reports. Everything's fine. Brethren are settled. Throws up a red flag. Everything's fine. No problems. You're the only congregation in the United States. And you start seeing that, you think, okay. On my reports, I don't say everything's great. No problems anywhere. I'd be lying. I don't mention specifics or people, but, we have this challenge going on, or this, or these things. So we want the truth. That's critical. That's important. Jesus Christ was not only the way, but the truth. Does Christ say it's okay to teach about Him by using lies and falsehoods? Christmas teaches an emphasis that is not taught in Scriptures. Christ and the Father desired the emphasis not to be on His birth, but on what? On the teachings of His life, because He lives in us. The world focuses that He's a baby in a manger, overshadowed by His mother Mary. Where we travel in Colombia a lot, in Central and South America, Mexico at times, there's a huge emphasis on Mother Mary. Hardly a car goes by that doesn't have a sticker of some kind in the back, of a replica or related. They're quite intricate on Mary. Mother Mary, Even the song, it's Words of Wisdom, was it the Beatles sang that? And so, it would be worshiping a false god to keep these customs. Let me explain. If you claim to do something to honor a person and do just the opposite of what the person asked, then are you honoring him? Are you being obedient? Are you being truthful? I was born on October 8th, or October 6th, depending which birth certificate you look at. I do have two. That's a long story. I'm adopted, and I just pick. Depends. No, I keep one, but I do have two. Now you're really looking at me confused, but I was born on October 8th. If you give me a birthday party on December 1st, I'd wonder what's wrong with you. Okay, if you invited, I'm going to take you out to dinner for your birthday on December 1st, when I was born on October 8th, and you knew that, and I told you. If you gave me a birthday party and began to exchange gifts among yourselves, but didn't give one to me, I would also wonder about you. Just being logical. What's the purpose of a true worship of God? Above all is to obey God, reverence and stand in awe of Him, and to be devoted to Him. John 4. Let's go to John 4, 22, verse 22 to 24. You worship, you don't know what, for know what we worship, for the salvation is of the Jews. But the hour comes, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeks such to worship Him. God is Spirit. The A there is not in the original Greek. It should say, God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. That's pretty obvious, pretty open, pretty direct. John 17:17, another scripture. This is a good memory verse. If you don't get into memory verses, you could do that. It would be suggested. John 17:17, sanctify them, make them holy, set them apart. Only God can sanctify something. Through thy truth, your word is truth. So, this is truth. If it's in here, it's good to go. If it doesn't jive with this, or it's not congruous, then we have a problem. The famous line from the movie by Tom Hanks, was it? Houston, we have a problem. We have a problem. The word worship, proskuneo, means a derivation or derivative, meaning to kiss like a dog licking his master's hand. Oh, how dare we be like that of God? Well, we honor, reverence, worship him. 60 occurrences in the Bible. Translated worship 60 times. To kiss the hand, a token of reverence. Among the Orientals, especially the Persians, to fall upon the knees and touch the ground with the forehead is an expression of profound reverence. In the New Testament, by kneeling or prostration to do homage. Not prostration, but prostration. I always sing that song, Let Angels whatever fall. I always thought that's got to be painful, but that's the other word. Prostrate is different than prostate. You never thought about that. Probably wished you hadn't thought about it, but now you have. To make obeisance, whether an express respect or to make supplication, a use of homage shown to men and beings of superior rank, to the Jewish high priest, to God and to Christ, of heavenly beings. Worship involves our total submission or our will giving it to God. We humble ourselves before God. We submit to him completely. Your God is the one whom you obey. Your God can be a different God. Your God can be Christmas or whatever holiday it is, or your job, or your wife, or your personal understanding of the Scriptures, or your way of thinking can become a god. Anything that comes ahead of what God says or what he is. Teaching and observing these non-biblical days also hides the truth. It does this in two distinct ways. A true non-Christian origin of Christmas is hidden because people think it's Christian or it now honors Christ. They are not taught what the Bible has to say about it. Also, the days that God wants us to observe are blatantly overlooked. We'll be going through this tomorrow during our meeting. I'm already thinking ahead to Passover and unleavened bread and Pentecost and trumpets and the Feast of Tabernacles, the 8th day. I'm already thinking, planning. In fact, I'm planning for a year past that in our trips. My travel agents already, we're starting to think, where do we need to go? I found it interesting. Mr. Kubik was talking. He's headed toward Brazil or in Brazil with George DeCampos. And he said, boy, these flights are multiple and kind of complex. It's been easy in Africa. I thought, welcome to my world. My poor wife's the one that has to make those. And let another man praise you. I'm very grateful for that. I don't have the patience. I don't know what I would do. But it's complicated. And so the days that we're coming up to as we prepare are blatantly overlooked. Christianity observes Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, Halloween, right? That I just share this with you. That really unsettles me when I drive by a church and there's a sign, the sermon this week on Halloween, Happy Halloween. Or Christmas is bad enough, but Halloween is even more evil. There is nothing about that. I just detest it. We had Halloweeners this year, as we call them. We had the lights off. No, we didn't have the lights off. We had the door light off. We were told they won't come if your door light's off. we were doing something, and my wife was in the living room, and the doorbell rang, and where were? Oh, in the kitchen light. They rang the doorbell, so we went and sneaked to look out the window, and there was like 30 of them out the end of the driveway. I'm like, what's the deal? You know? Didn't have a fire hose, but anyway. So you're not even safe from that anymore. I don't know. We don't have a basement to hide in. But Halloween is evil. There is nothing good about it. How many of the professing Christians know about God's holy days and the true meaning of those days? The holy days picture the true plan of salvation and how God will eventually offer salvation to all mankind. That is joy to the world. The Lord is come. That in the future of what God says when he comes back. That is something to rejoice about. Salvation to all mankind. You and I cannot worship God in any old way we want. The main reason that Israel went into captivity in the Old Testament was because they followed the practices of the nations around them, the very thing that God said don't do. And man is so good at this. Don't do it. You and I do that. You see a sign that says wet paint. What do? Right? Don't do something. If you want your children to do something they shouldn't, before they do it, say, now make sure you don't do this. What is it about human nature? I think if you took the speed limit signs down and there were no speed limit signs, it would self-correct because all the crazy drivers would eventually flip over. It would be a genetic cleansing. And I think the normal people would say, you know, when the front end starts shaking or I hit something, I'm driving too fast. Or you only have to hit black ice once. Anybody ever hit that? What do? You slow down after you've had, or you have an accident. In the Autobahn, do they have a speed limit? You know why? Because the cars that can go fast are in that lane. The others don't get out of the way, you're going to die. So I've heard. John Miller might know better. There's a proclivity. If it says 55, you got to do 70. I'm guilty. Nobody here speeds. I do. I don't go, well, I do some. It depends on the traffic. We don't miss driving from Charlotte to Cincinnati. You go up through the Appalachians, as it should be pronounced, and you go through there. It's nerve-wracking. Anybody ever drive those passes? It's like if they're not doing 90 and flashing their lights, you know, and so you keep up with the flow. How many of you, you don't raise your hands, but if you came up to a stop sign and there was no stop sign, it was a four-way, would you slow down and look, or would you just barrel through like you own it? I don't know. Depends on what part of Florida you're from. Right? I don't know. I think there's some things that we do, but it's because what? We know there's a penalty. And sometimes people are like, it's a rush to do something we're told not to do. You know, why do they make you fill out your taxes? So some people can figure out how to not do it. If everybody just gave 10% and send it in, or a simplified 1040, how much did you make? Send it all in. Whatever. It would solve some of this. And ancient Israel was no different. God said, don't do this, and I'm going to do that. Right? 2 Kings 17. A couple scriptures in the Old Testament here. 2 Kings 17, verse 5. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout the land and went to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. 721 to 718 BC, I think that was when it was. And the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria, took Samaria and carried Israel, not the Jews, but he carried Israel away into Assyria, and he placed them in Halah and Abor by the river of Gozan. It was near the Caspian Sea, and in the cities of the Medes. For it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God. That's the summary of Israel going into captivity. which had brought them out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord God cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel which they had made. And the children of Israel, verse 9, did secretly those things that were not right against the Lord their God, and built high places in their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. And they set them up images in groves in every high hill, and under every green tree. You know what's interesting? This time of year, I walk, and it's dark. And I'm not trying to be a voyeur or look into people's homes and snoop. But a lot of them, the windows are wide open and the TVs, the big screen TVs are on. I live in a nice area. I am embarrassed by what I see on the TVs. I don't need to say much. In the secrecy of our own homes, people think what? They're oblivious. It's okay. God sees everything. And that can be applicable to us as well. The things that you see. And they set them up images in groves, and they burn incense in the high places, as did the heathen, whom the Lord carried away, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord. For they served idols. The Lord had said unto them, you shall not do this thing. Oh, but it's so fun. It's so fun. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Right? Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and all the seers, saying, turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes according to the law which I commanded your fathers and sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but they hardened their necks. To the neck of their fathers did not believe in the Lord their God. They rejected his statutes, his covenant with their fathers, and testimonies which he tested. And they followed vanity, became vain, went after the heathen, were round, concerning whom the Lord had charged that they should not do like them. And they left the commandments of the Lord their God, and made molten images, calves, a grove, worshipped the host of heaven, and served Baal. And they caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire. Divination, enchantment, sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel. He removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. And we know from history the Jews stayed there for another 100 years or so. They worshiped Baal and the Ashtoreths. You know, it was like, who cares, God? We're going to do as we please. We don't care what you say, but we'll call it Christian, then you'll be happy with us. And I won't turn there, but in Judges chapter 2, verse 7, 11 through 13, they worship Baal and Ashtoreth. They actually thought, this is better. Why is it God tells us something and we always have to improve on it? Right? We understand it better. It's like I heard a sermon one time, way years ago. You know what the title was? You're going to love it. I may have told you this. The things Christ said that were never written down. That was the title. I'm not joking. Big red flag went up. I'm like, hello? How do you know he said it if it wasn't recorded? It was crazy. So we know things that God doesn't know. Sometimes we fall in that category, right? They continue to be worshipped today by the same customs, the Babylonian ones. They have been renamed and called Christian. So we need to understand, friends. I'm going to quit a little bit early today so we can have time to fellowship before I head back. But we need to understand it does not make it Christian. We've only scratched the surface. I would suggest between now and December 25th, it's a good time to cover the topic with our children and families and do some research and study. Because if you don't, here's what can happen. When you go through and you start to hear the music, or maybe you're sitting in your sofa, on your sofa in your comfortable chair, and it's starting to get dark out. And TV comes on, you see a commercial, and there's snow coming down, a fire crackling, and you hear chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost, whatever. And you kind of get fuzzy and warm inside instead of, bah, humbug, right? Or this is not of God. People used to, I've done that. I'm sitting with a gathering. I'll say, I can't stand this. This is awful. Chill, man. Don't get so upset. It's just Christmas. Now, you don't want to offend your relatives and neighbors. Get on your front porch with a megaphone. Christmas is evil. I don't say that. But get creative. People say, you don't want to get your nose punched, but have you gotten your Christmas shopping done? Just say, I don't shop for Christmas. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not. I don't want to buy things I don't want for people I don't like with money I don't have. That always gets them. Just say, or like I do. I say, I finished doing it 56 years ago. Wow, how old are you? 56. Or Merry Christmas. Just look at them and say, what? How are you going to answer that? Oh, thank you. You too. No, because then you condone what they do. But you don't want to be obnoxious and say, pagan, right? Don't do that. So what do? Have you thought about it? Because you're going to have to face it. And they're sincere. Is it wrong to say thank you? I don't know. That depends. You're just thanking them for being nice, I guess. You can say, have a nice day. Hope your Christmas tree catches on fire. No, don't say that. How do you handle this? You don't want to be obnoxious, but you want to be all things to all men, but you also need to clearly make it clear you don't observe it. Right? What are your plans for Christmas Eve? I'm going to go to bed early and... Really? Are you having a party? No. You want to come to one? No. And then they feel bad because you're so put upon. It's horrible. Or you can say, well, we have something we keep from the Bible called the Feast of Tabernacles. And we get 10% of our income for 8 days to spend on anything we want to eat or drink and nice lodging and a few other things. They're going to look at you like, call the people in the white coats. Get them out of here, right? How are we going to handle that? The United Church of God main website has numerous articles and sermons dealing with the topic. God is seeking those who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. So hopefully today none of this is new, but Christmas undisguised? I hope so. Have a good Sabbath.